My friend, when was the last time you followed a story back, all the way to the very heart of yourself? I want to offer you this question today. I want you to take this away with you, to ask yourself, like I have asked myself and will continue to ask, a question that has cracked open the sky for me. Who could you be if you were willing to be changed by someone else's story? Some years back, I was asked, what do you think, what do you want your work to achieve? What I suppose was my intention for my poetry, for my plays, for my stories. And I found myself saying, I want to change the world. I am Scottish, so I was instantly mortified to declare such a lofty ambition. My natural instinct to wind your neck in had failed me. I felt I had fallen into a trap. But what struck me after the flush left my cheek was, I want to change the world was not only surprising to me, it felt true. It was what I hoped to contribute to. It was what I believed poetry, plays, what I always believed stories were capable of achieving. They carried the possibility to change us. And I believed it because stories had changed me. I felt that change happen within me, in the dark of a theatre, in the space within a poem, in a story told, read, witnessed. And let me say, for those who think I am not also talking about music and film and television, I am. I absolutely am. I am talking about the power of art, of story, of all our stories, from all of us. I co-create an arts podcast called Quinescast with the Scottish intersectional feminist theatre company Stella Quines. Last season, we invited the Scottish writer Kirsten Innes to reflect upon change and what that means to her. Her powerful and deeply resonant piece spoke to what many of us are feeling in this moment, one of overwhelm, the paralysis in the face of so many fragmented, fractured, incomplete stories. These are anxious, divisive, and fast-moving times. We are stuck, glued to our phones, overwhelmed, and then paralyzed by the endless calls for action, for response, an endless loop. What can we do? Who should we listen to? How do we cope with all the problems of the world, all of the time, all at once? Ignore them? Distract ourselves? Numb ourselves? I mean, who could blame us? How do we hear a story fully in all its complexities? How can we hear each other properly in such noise, in such dystopic clamor? Overwhelmed? Paralysis? Switch off? Opt out? James Baldwin, in The Artist's Struggle for Integrity, says that poets, and by that I mean all artists, are finally the only ones who know the truth about us. And I often share this when working with writers to encourage them to think about the potential of their own work, but also because it is my way out of hopelessness, out of that feeling that I lack agency. We are saturated in the horrors of this world, but we are offered so little opportunity to meaningfully act and to engage with each other. His words are my way back to my own possibility to respond meaningfully and with purpose to the world I find myself in. That poets, and by that I mean all artists, are finally the only ones who know the truth about us. They know the truth about us. They offer us the truth about who we are, and perhaps the only ones who know who we can become. The question is, where can this knowing lead us? Natalie Ibu, the theatre director and artistic director of Northern Stage in Newcastle, said to me when I wondered aloud about the power of theatre to change the world, if that was naive or only a comforting thought that people in the arts like to share with each other. She said to me that theatre may not be able to change people, change the world, but it can and frequently does change people. The stories that theatre tell can change people. There is a reason that poets and writers, playwrights, the storytellers of our societies are often seen as a threat by those in power who wish to control and dominate who we are and who we can be. Story makers are change makers. They challenge, say the unsayable, inspire, say the unsaid, help find meaning in the dark times, beauty in the bleak times, make room, break open, help push through the new. They invite us, offer us the opportunity to put ourselves in another's shoes, to stand there where they stand. They offer the truth of who we all are. They offer us the opportunity to hear, to feel, and to sit with the other story. As the poet Roger Robinson says, poetry helps us exercise our empathy. Poets build us empathy machines. Who could you be if you were willing to be changed by the other's story? I'm sure you're all aware, how could you not be, that last year the Queen died. Now, we did not talk about how so many of us felt perplexed by it all, at least not at the time. Many of us were in a self-imposed period of censorship, but it was a strange time if you pay attention to the polls in Scotland. A panel-based poll in 2022 found that only 47% in Scotland are in favour of a royal head of state, with only 45% in favour of retaining the monarchy at all, according to a poll by the think tank British Future. Yet our news channels, our media, told a different picture. So many, over half of us, it seemed, looked on at these people and their outpourings of grief and their insistence that we would pause so much of civil society with, at the very least, a raised eyebrow. So strange it seemed. And so easily it was to mock the Union Jack waving crowds, and for some of us, with a fear of flag waving, especially of the red, white, and blue variety. It was deeply unsettling, frightening, even. We became headlines to each other, for and against, respectful, disrespectful, acceptable, unacceptable, monarchist, Republican. But these headlines were only that. What if we read the whole article, as it were, and asked for the whole story from each other? Let's say your next door neighbour, for argument's sake, or maybe yours, or maybe you, were one of the crowds on the Royal Mile, waiting in silence for the funeral cortege to pass. She was surprised at how affected she was by the death of the Queen. What would happen if I did not offer her all the ways in which the monarchy offended me in response, its imperial legacy, its support of a privileged elite, but instead asked her why the Queen meant so much to her? If I listened, really listened, surrendered myself to that listening, I would find, as I often did, that the conversation was not ever really about the Queen. It was usually about loved and much missed mothers and grandmothers. It was about a street party in childhood and that sweet nostalgia of belonging to a community, to a family, a desire for stability. It was often a story of grief, the pomp and ceremony, a release of something, the crowd, the queue, a place to feel part of something bigger after so many months of feeling alone, isolated, and locked down, of all these years now of private and unexpressed grief. These were not stories that excluded me. I could find connection, common ground, fellow feeling in them. Did our headlines change? Not really. But did my understanding, my compassion of those I thought I did not understand change? Yes, it did. Is that nothing? No. Is that the start of something? Maybe. A need, perhaps, for more opportunities to talk about our grandmothers and their lives, to have places to grieve with each other, opportunity to come together in community, in a theatre, with a play. In listening and really listening and really hearing her story, have I not also made space to tell mine? Could I now tell her about what the monarchy represents to me as a woman of colour with a family history that spans and holds all the wounds of empire? That it seemed to truly belong to this country, to be secure in that belonging. This country demanded me to be on board, in agreement with the national mood. This country, presented to us for over a fortnight of national mourning, required me to hold my tongue. But in making space, in listening, had I now made a space to be heard? Is there now a place made, or a possibility of a place, in this place of empathy where we can be more than headlines to each other? We can be our story, our whole story to each other. One person to another person, and we find ourselves in community. Like one step to another step leads us to a different position to the one we started from. In a theatre, in a poem, in a novel, in television, on film, populated by all of us, in all our complexity and vulnerability, in all of our story, in all of our stories, we can create models, places for us to exercise our empathy for each other. And empathy, I believe, is the real birthplace of change. For empathy offers us the possibility to change our minds, our fixed notions of each other, our fixed positions, because moving to where the other sits, even if it's only for a moment, allows us to be seen, to feel the world differently, to open up ourselves to each other. And when we are wearing opposing hats, that can lead to something profound. It can be where something new is born. I was asked many years ago what I wanted my work to do. I said I wanted it to change the world. That felt so true to me then. Now it feels like only a half-formed thought. What I wanted was the possibility that my work might change something in you, that you might carry that change, that possibility of change forward. For making art is a process of giving away, of letting go. It's a gift. Like mothering a child, we are constantly wishing our stories well, hoping they will carry the best of us forward, all our good intent. I want a change. I want to live in a changed world. Don't you? What if we were brave enough to tell our own stories and to really listen to the stories of others? If we allowed ourselves to be really open to being changed by each other, if together we made a place of empathy, a place for the possibility of meaningful connection, for the possibility of changed minds, changed hearts, changed people. I would argue that this place is theatre, that this place is poetry, and it is. It really is. But it's also your front room, your classroom, your playground, standing in the street, making time for your neighbour, listening, fully listening to their story, slowly told. I am not dawn chorus to night owl time. I am the slow, flowing burn time. I live leaf drop time. I am slow enough for moss to grip, but I am not to be pitied for my aging. I am following each thought. When was the last time you thought it through, had time to watch a thought of yours grow? Follow it until it hit a wall, or that other thought from that other one, from that othered one. Allowed it to be changed, turned out and in. When was the last time you let a thought complete itself, undo itself, renew itself, make a fool of itself, run away with itself? They are seeds on the wind. They are fireflies, but they are being collected in bell jars now. They gather here brewing to petrol bombs now. Your watch tells you you have spent too long here, that you must move on from here. Your watch tells you this, but once you played all day in the woods, you climbed a tree to hear its stories, danced to the rook's cawn in the clearing. But they told you you had been lost for an hour. Funny how you believed them. They who told you the time, they who gave it to you with a wristband. It was only an hour, they said, yet you knew it had been all day. You knew it because it was dark. And then it was dark. And you couldn't find the home of yourself. Oh, my friend, when was the last time you followed a story back, all the way to the very heart of yourself? Make yourselves heard, but more importantly, make yourself listen. Who could we be if we were willing to be changed by each other? Thank you for listening. Take care.